Welcome back, folks. Thanks for joining us for our guest artist series. My name is Grace, and today I have the pleasure of David Dwyer joining us. David, thanks for joining us. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a pleasure to be here.
Pleasure to have you. David and I are going to talk this morning about his role on Shakespeare Hill as our scenic designer. So we're going to talk about his process as a designer, creating the stage that you see every summer. Let's get started, David, just by talking about how a director's concept influences your approach on a design. And going off of that also, what are some steps to your design process?
Yeah, the director's vision is really what I base my design off of. And generally, in a good director-designer relationship, there's going to be a lot of give and take. And usually a director will come with an idea and I can add some ideas. And we usually arrive at something better than what we originally, the original concept was. And there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of give and take in that whole process for us to arrive at things. So I'll immediately start sketching things in our initial meeting and just get some additional ideas out there. They'll take a look at it and say, oh, I like this part, not so much this part, and then we refine. And it's a process. Generally, it's over a period of months, 2 to 3 months. You'll generally have a meeting somewhere around in February, and then usually settle on a final design somewhere in the middle of April, somewhere in there. Sometimes we arrive to it a little quicker, depending on how it was the original concept, how refined it was when the original concept was presented. Sometimes it takes a little longer to hash through things. As far as my process goes, I generally start with, concepts and ideas. And if it's a script I'm not as familiar with, what some of the other, the not Midsummer Night's Dream or Hamlet or Much Ado or any of those, I will, of course, go to the text and see what Shakespeare had to say about location and what all those things are. And then consult with the director. We very rarely on the Hill keep things in Elizabethan period. So find out what direction we're going with that, and then I'll try to fill my head with as many images as I possibly can from whatever time period we're going to be in. And so that way, as I start sketching and as I start designing, my design choices are coming from an informed position. So it may not be an exact duplicate of something I found in the research, but it's influenced by that and coming from that informed position.
The one that's most vivid for me is a couple years ago, Taming of the Shrew, when we did the pirate ship. It's always really fun to see them kind of almost misplaced, because you always think of Shakespeare as Elizabethan. Touching back really quickly, in terms of reading the script, how does your approach to a script when you first get it and just reading that text, how does it differ from an actor's approach?
Every actor has their own process. Every designer has their own process. As a designer, what I'm looking at is a little more overarching. So I'm looking at general thematic concerns in there. What is the playwright trying to say? What is the director trying to say? And trying to meet all of those different demands. The original Globe Theater that Shakespeare performed on didn't have scenery. It was a unit stage, right? Because it would, cost extra money, and they didn't want to spend the extra money in the Elizabethan time. So the characters would come out, and if they say, what country is this? This is Illyria, my lady. Or here we are in the Forest of Arden. They would say, here we are. The audience would accept it, and we would just move on. So there really wasn't much there, but that does within the text give us some clues on what we were trying to portray, because we can do a little bit more scenically.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit more in terms of how, just talking about that overarching approach to a script, how a set design actually helps to convey what's going on in the world? Not just we are in this area, but the dynamics of characters and what time of year and stuff like that.
Yeah, I look at scenic design as a part of, it's of course one aspect of the overall performance, but I view my role as a visual storyteller. So when an audience comes in and they see a set, they should be able to get an inkling of where this journey is going to go over the next 2.5 hours, right? So I like to be able to tell the story within the confines.
Touching specifically on Shakespeare in Delaware Park stage, as you know, it's outdoors, which changes a lot of things, I would assume, for you. How does that shift, whether it's limitations or, more ability? Because it's outdoors, you have to deal with wind and rain, and then even the setting sun. We go from daytime to nighttime because of when we do the shows.
I think it is exactly like you said. There's some advantages there. There's a lot of disadvantages there. Some of the disadvantages, I'll start there, is the weather and the wind. So all those things, and the sun, all have an effect on what I put on that stage. What I normally use on an indoor set, if I was creating columns, I would, go to a carpet store and they'd give you the tubes from the carpet, and I would use those on there. But those are essentially just cardboard. And I thought, okay, if I paint them really well and I seal them, it'll be all right. And it rained once and the whole column just essentially disintegrated and collapsed. And I had to replace it with a plastic pipe instead. So that's just one example. But the advantage is I can go up a lot higher on things. That Taming of the Shrew set that you mentioned, I put a huge 16-foot flagpole on top of the set that was already there. So there's a lot of other advantages in that regard as well. I can use some different materials. For Macbeth a few years ago, and for King Lear, I just ordered slab wood, which are the cut-off pieces from a sawmill when they're making lumber. So it's the pieces, it's like a half arc that has bark on it and everything, and I use those for the set. So there's a lot of things that are advantages and disadvantages of it. The main one is the weather, so it's just got to be careful of that. And the wind is one thing. I did a set that had roofs on it. I thought I stapled the shingles that I put on those roofs on really well, but it didn't hold up in a thunderstorm, and I had to go in and replace and touch up things. But every once in a while there's some touch-ups. But been doing this in Delaware Park for a few years, and I think I got it down now.
Yeah, Mother Nature can be unpredictable, especially on Shakespeare Hill, it seems. Always have to repair. Do you have a favorite show you've worked on?
As far as my sets go, I really like the King Lear set. That one had so many different textures and so many different layers to it. A lot of natural materials and those kind of things.
The pictures look phenomenal. The lighting combined with the set, combined with the costumes, but also combined with the outdoor element, because see one of those pictures and then have the backdrop of trees or like of Hoyt Lake and stuff.
Sometimes the setting sun is a really nice little effect on there.
It's a cool thing. Thanks so much for joining us, David. We appreciate it.
Not a problem. You have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye, David.